Ori and the Will of the Wisps is a beautiful game. Not only does it look amazing, it sounds amazing. It is one of the few games where I can just sit there and listen to the soundtrack for hours on end, admiring all of the beautiful art in the game. So what actually is it? So this game is a metroidvania. For the uninitiated, a metroidvania generally contains a vast interconnected map. Parts of this map are originally not open for the player to explore, but once the player acquires the right items, tools, or abilities, the area in which they can explore grows rapidly. As well as gaining access to new areas to explore, regions in previously visited areas may open up to the player, revealing secret areas which can contain new upgrades or collectibles for the player to discover, or opening a shortcut. This means the next time the player travels through the area, they can quickly travel from one point of the map to the other. I think it's important to discuss what options are available to the player. The options menu is broken down into 5 categories. Options which affect how you play the game are found under the Settings, Graphics and Controls tab. Also available to the player are the Leaderboards menu and the Achievements menu. Let's start with the Settings tab. The user can adjust the volume of sound effects and music separately, as is standard for most games nowadays. The dead zone for a controller's joysticks can be altered to modify the sensitivity and reactiveness of controller input. The amount of haptic feedback in the form of controller vibration can also be adjusted to suit the player's preferences. Some other nice features are available to the player within the game, such as the ability to toggle damage values, which shows scrolling text when a character deals or receives damage, as well as showing a trail on the map to show the recent path travelled by the player. This is nice for those that often find themselves walking in circles when playing the game. Next up is the Graphics tab. I personally found this tab to be a little bit lacking, but it still contained all of the features which should be considered essential. The player can adjust the resolution for the game to be displayed at. The game can be toggled between windowed and exclusive full screen modes. Unfortunately, there is no borderless windowed mode within Ori and Will of the Wisps. If you struggle with motion sickness while playing this game, you can switch motion blur off in this tab. VSync can be enabled to limit the game's frame rate to your monitor's refresh rate. This is nice if you find you encounter screen tearing while playing the game. Finally, the brightness and contrast can be adjusted to suit the player's preferences. One feature which I would like to see here is a colorblind mode. This is because some players may find it hard to differentiate between certain colors and scenes. This may hinder their ability to progress further in the game. The last tab I'm going to cover is the Controls tab. There are 3 control schemes available to the player. These are keyboard only, keyboard and mouse, and the controller scheme. Both keyboard and mouse allow the player to adjust keybinds to suit their preferences, allowing up to 4 buttons to be binded to a single action. Within the controller scheme, I haven't found a way to configure keybinds within this menu. However, I find that most of the controls are intuitive, and I did not have any issues with the default setup. There is one thing that I will mention for those of you, like me, who use a DS4 remote. I have had issues using the DS4 remote natively within this game. In order to get the controller working as intended, I had to use a third-party program to get controller input to work properly. This is not, however, an issue unique to this game, although it would have been nice to see native DS4 support. Okay, the player can explore a map. What else, I hear you ask? Within the map, the player can fight enemies and bosses, complete quests for NPCs, and find a large amount of collectibles scattered around the map. While being on the shorter side in terms of length for a metroidvania, the game is still filled with content. With some sources giving an estimate of 12 hours for a player to finish the game, and 16 hours for a player to reach 100% completion on the first playthrough. That being said, it is not unlikely that it will take longer for you to complete the game in the first playthrough. I myself found that I was taking moments to just sit there and enjoy the views and music found within the game. Now that that's out of the way, let's move on to where I think this game really shines: the gameplay. The game starts with a lengthy but skippable prologue which eases the player into the world. There are quite a few moments within this prologue which take away control from the player in order to deliver narrative. I personally was not a fan of this, but those of you who wish to see and experience the story of the game may enjoy this more than I did. The game plays as a 2D platformer, allowing players to explore the vast world by running, jumping and climbing on surfaces. There are interactable objects such as poles you can climb, moss you can stick to, and poles you can swing around to launch yourself higher. I feel the game does a great job of easing the player into learning these mechanics and how the player interacts with the aforementioned world objects, with informative tips appearing the first time you encounter these in the game. While exploring, the player will encounter various enemies. These enemies all act in a distinct manner. Some enemies shoot projectiles in an arc around themselves, almost in a defensive manner, while others may take the brute approach and charge the player directly. All enemies I've encountered thus far deal contact damage, meaning the player can't allow themselves to get too close to enemies or risk taking damage. Never worry though, the map is filled with pickups which restore the player's health and energy. Hold up, you mentioned energy? Yes, energy. At a certain point in the game, which is relatively early on, the player unlocks abilities. As you may have seen in the controls menu, there are 3 ability slots for the player to make use of, with 18 abilities available to the player. This means that the player must pick and choose between abilities which suit them best for the current situation. This can be done at any time the player is not in combat with an enemy. Abilities have a range of effects, from dealing damage and aiding the player in combat to being used to solve puzzles to progress further within the game. Using an ability drains the player's energy meter, which, like health, can be recovered by slaying enemies or finding a pickup while exploring the map. Having a limited amount of slots is a nice feature, as it leads to the player creating, testing and revising different builds to see how they perform at different sections in the game. Although it is possible that the player will eventually find their favoured abilities and only use them, leaving many abilities unused, or even worse, only used when required by the game. The final key feature I will point out is the spirit shard system. This is a system where the player may find different spirit shards around the map and equip them in dedicated slots. This is similar to the charm system in Hollow Knight. However, unlike in Hollow Knight, these spirit shards may be swapped at any time, and do not require the player to find a rest site to do so. Some spirit shards may also be leveled up, increasing their effectiveness within the game. To conclude, Ori and the Will of the Wisps is an expansive and immersive game, with many ways for the player to play. I find this really enticing and can see myself playing this game a lot in the future. It gives me Hollow Knight vibes and has tempted me to also try the game's precursor, Ori and the Blind Forest. Some players find speedrunning this game entertaining, while others may take it slow and take their time exploring every nook and cranny in the map. This just goes to show the range of players this game can attract. If you haven't tried this game already, I highly recommend you do so, as I do not regret playing this game in the slightest. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, as it would really help my channel grow and for my reviews to reach more people. Let me know what game I should review next down in the comments below.